Now for our regular Wednesday morning book review, this one is definitely going to satisfy bookworkers, or bookworms rather. Today we look at Ashling McCarthy's book, Down at Jika Jika Tavern, as the story of Nonhle Ngubane, a student anthropologist whose life takes a wild turn when her father is arrested. Ngubane struggles to make sense of the accusations, and without giving away too much, let's speak to author Ashling McCarthy. Good morning to you, Ashling, and thank you so much for your time. I'm just jealous that you're in Durban enjoying the eternal summer there while we're freezing down here in Johannesburg. Good morning.
Thanks, Cindy. Thanks for having me.
Okay, the title is very interesting, but this is a three-part series of the book, and I made sure not to read it overnight because there are some very scary parts if you, like myself, have a bit of a faint heart. But it's interesting how the title, Down at Jika Jika Tavern, what inspired that?
Well, the book is set in Zululand, and it's part of a, as you've said, a series called the Poacher's Moon crime series. And it really centers around wildlife crime in the Zululand area. And the title, Down at Jika Jika Tavern, comes from a particular scene in the book where Nonhle finds herself at this tavern, and it's part of her journey and her search to prove her father's innocence. So I won't give too much away, but Jika Jika Tavern is a central kind of place in the book.
And Nonhle resonates with many of us, you know, being a city dweller, very established, successful anthropologist who now has to travel back to her rural KwaZulu-Natal and meeting or being reintroduced to that particular environment. She's got the weave. She can't handle much of the dust and everything else that the nature provides or the environment there.
Yes, so Nonhle for me was a really important character. I run a non-profit in Zululand, so I work with a lot of young women, young girls, and you know they're aspiring to a different life from the one that they have in their rural environment. So it really was a character that was developed to inspire young girls and young women in our rural context that there is so much out in the broader world if they open themselves to the opportunities, for example, that our non-profit offer, but also that there is real merit in coming back to rural areas and reinvesting in the communities that you've grown up in if you have that opportunity to do so.
And which is something that you do in your personal life as well, that being a social entrepreneur, giving back to impoverished communities. But let's go back to your fictional writing. There's a part of you that you describe as being interconnected. In other words, there are no coincidences in life. I think Deepak Chopra puts it in his book called Synchro Destiny, you know, that every part of you or events that happen in your life are preparing you for the next step.
Yes, definitely. I think for me as a schoolgirl, I left school with feeling very disillusioned, not knowing what I was meant to do, how I was going to do it. And so possibly made some career choices that in the beginning weren't sound. But when I look back now at the age of 44, I can see how connected every single choice I made, whether it was the right choice at the time or potentially had taken me on a detour, eventually led me to the place I'm in now, which is working exactly where I want to be. I started as a graphic designer, moved into craft development, anthropology, the non-profit sector, and all of that has influenced my writing and the way in which I see the world. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yes, and also looking at rhino poaching, which has been quite a serious issue in South Africa. Now, the scene is set with what I can only detect to be very amateur rhino poaching. You know, they've even consulted a sangoma to make them somehow disappear to law enforcement, should they be kept. The sounds and the textures of how you describe that night scene, I even get goosebumps now. How does your mind work when you pen these thoughts onto a book?
I really try and imagine how people in that kind of scene would be thinking and feeling. I mean, obviously a lot of research goes into writing those scenes. It's not just simply something I take out of my imagination. But I think as humans, we can understand concepts and emotions such as fear and the motivation to create a better life for ourselves and our families. And I think a lot of the scenes in the book really try to explore how people on the other side of the fence to us may feel, and to try and develop a sense of empathy for why they have landed in these places. Yes, it could be greed, but it could also be the fact that a lot of people have been presented with an opportunity that could elevate themselves and their families far quicker than the kinds of jobs that they can find in those rural contexts.
And not to give up too much, but you know, a daughter who looks up to her father, as many of us do, Nonhle is no exception. But her dad now finds himself being accused of this particular crime of rhino poaching and being in these crime syndicates. What message were you trying to send there? Because we don't know, we're not going to tell whether he was found guilty or not, but if your parent or your hero is accused of something that he may not or have done, it is quite a dilemma that you process as a child, a girl child at that.
Yeah, very much so. I think the foundation of love within a family would obviously lead you to 100% believe that your parent is not guilty, and especially if they've been a role model throughout your life and have never given you reason to believe that they could do such a thing. However, in the socioeconomic climate that we live in, there is always potential that financial woes or inability to provide for a family like one might want to could actually lead somebody to do something that they'd never imagined that they would do.